Welcome back. You're listening to Get Real with Bob and Stacey. You're joining us for our Leaders and Legends segment here on the Money Matters Radio Network. We're joined by phone today by Jennifer Lynn Robinson, CEO and founder of Purposeful Networking. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am super excited to have Jennifer on the show today. She has a website called Purposeful Networking, and basically she teaches workshops and seminars on how to engage better, how to be a better networker. So for anybody listening to the show that is in sales or they're an entrepreneur, what do you do if you hate networking? Do you have any tips for somebody that just despises it?
Absolutely. I have definitely some good tips. I'd say the first thing is start small, start as much in your comfort zone as you can. So don't set yourself up for failure if you hate networking and go to an event that has, let's say 100 people. Try to start out with something small, like maybe getting on meetup.com and finding some people that share a commonality with something you enjoy, and going to an informal meetup or a small networking event and seeing how you do with that. If you can't even bring yourself to do that, there's certainly other ways that you can get into networking if you really hate it, outside of the traditional business networking event. And my tips for that would be to kind of look at things you're already doing in your life. For example, maybe you volunteer with a nonprofit, or you're involved with your church or synagogue. Maybe you're in the PTA at your school, at your kid's school. So there's lots of opportunities kind of in daily life to network that maybe we don't traditionally see as networking and don't take advantage of. And those would be great entrees into doing more networking without kind of setting yourself up at a big event.
That's great. One of the things that I can't stand when I attend a networking event is when people kind of come over and puke on you with all the information about their company. Like, what would you consider too far? Like, how much could I talk about my business if I'm attending a networking event?
I could not agree with you more, and that's the worst. And I actually, in some of my workshops, I do some skits, and that's one of the things that gets a lot of laughs when I kind of imitate somebody who does that. They kind of throw up on you with everything, all their services, everything they offer, their promotions. So yeah, you basically want to limit what you say when you're having an initial conversation with somebody at a networking event. It should be more about listening to the person. So it's fine to introduce yourself, and inevitably somebody will ask you what you do or where you work, but kind of leave the conversation open. I love to ask people questions that are going to open them up more. We kind of all revert to the what do you do? It's kind of a standard. You meet somebody, oh, what do you do? But I think it's much better to open up your questions with things like, how's your day been? What projects are you working on? How did you get into the industry you're in? If you're at a particular networking event, you might want to ask somebody, have you been to this organization before? What do you like about it? This is a good time of year if you see people to ask how their holidays were, if they're, spending time with family or maybe taking a vacation. There's all kinds of things you can ask people to open up discussions, but really that initial introduction is not the time to kind of spit out all your services. There's going to be more opportunities to do that, and it's really a turnoff. I can see from what you're saying that you probably don't enjoy it. I know I don't enjoy it, and I think most people wouldn't enjoy it.
Right.
You don't even know if that person needs your services, so make an effort to try to get to know them.
One of the things that struck me when I was reading your website is I know that you are an attorney, you were an active litigator, and that you said you had a life-changing incident, you got into helping people build a network. But what struck me is you said, I made a lot of mistakes along the way. What are some of the mistakes you made originally that you help people now overcome when they're networking?
So I think two of the big ones. One is when I first started my business, I just started randomly joining organizations. And not only does that add up financially, but I think really if you're going to join organizations, you should be ready to commit actively to them for a year. And I really was not in a position to do that, either with my time or with my resources. So I feel like, it would be better with organizations to go a few times as a guest and really get a sense of who attends those events and who the target audience is for your business, and then make a commitment to join a few organizations rather than kind of just a kitchen sink approach like I did initially when I started my business. So I try to help people prevent doing that for themselves. and kind of target their networking better than I did initially.
And,
the other thing is, I think, prioritizing the contacts that you make. So I think, some of that is really, I think, instinct. So initially, when I would go to a lot of networking events, I would try to meet with everybody that wanted to meet with me. And you come to learn that there are people that are, the kind of people you want to get to know and build relationships with and collaborate with, who are giving people, who want to help out each other. And those are the people you want in your network. And then there are other people that are just users. And they kind of want to, as we were saying a minute ago, just fit out their services and kind of, channel your network and how you can help them. And they're not the kind of people that are going to help you. And those are not really people you want to waste your time with. So while, you can't always determine that ahead of time, I think the more networking you attend and the more people you meet, it's easier to use your instincts and kind of see, what people might be good to have a one-on-ones with or a phone call, and what people might be good to just go home and throw out their business card.
I love this. One of my things that I've been working on, last year's New Year's resolution, instead of doing New Year's resolutions, I do kind of unresolutions, the things I'm not going to do. And last year I said, I say yes to like every board, every networking opportunity. And so I started deleting some of the stuff that I was on, and it really makes it so you're really engaged on the few that you actually do continue to work with.
Absolutely. And I've kind of gone through that myself over the last few years, like you said, with boards, with networking groups, with a lot of different things in my life. And, I definitely encourage people at least once a year, and the end of the year, the beginning of the year is always a good time to do that, to kind of reassess what you're doing. How is it working for you? And it doesn't have to be about like a dollar figure or all about business, but it does have to be that you're getting something out of it. If that's emotional support from a group with other entrepreneurs, or if it's just personally that you have great friends in the group and it makes you happy to go. There's all kinds of reasons to stay with a group or stay on a board, but if you look at, the pluses and minuses and you're not seeing anything really positive coming out of it, except it's causing you stress and wasting your time, then it's time to move on to something else.
That's great. How would I craft a 30-second pitch for my business?
So, I think one of the main things is to target it to a specific audience. And I think there are definitely some various views on this. Some people think that you should have one elevator pitch for anywhere you go. I'm not an advocate of that. For example, with my own business, I do consulting that's more one-on-one, and I also do a lot with corporate events and conferences and things of that nature. So if I'm going to a networking group where it's going to be mostly executives or people from corporations, I definitely want to focus my 30-second pitch on something like that as opposed to the work that I do with individuals. So if there's a few niche areas that your business focuses on, make sure that you're researching the event enough to know what's going to work for you in that circumstance. So it's not a one-size-fits-all elevator pitch. One of the other things that I see people do that's really problematic to me is that they make their elevator pitch either too complicated, what I would call fancy speak, or they use a lot of industry jargon, which may be very common to their industry, but not common to somebody who's not in their industry. So, for example, I'll just make something up. Somebody would get up and say, we use a JAM, and that's very helpful to what we do. And then, whether it's in a conversation or in a 30-second pitch, the reality is that people don't know what JAM is. Most people will not turn around to them and say, I didn't know what that was. What is that? They're just going to politely smile and walk away or listen and then not follow up on learning more about you. So it's easier to just talk at everyone's level, with more commonality and, explain in kind of layman's terms what you do and not worry about the industry jargon and including all the services and just making it uncomplicated.
That's awesome. I'm going to recap on a couple of things, and then I have a couple more questions for you. For anybody that just tuned in, it's Jennifer Lynn Robinson, and her website is purposefulnetworking.com, and she is a consultant and does workshops on networking. So a couple of tips that I've written down for myself so far. Start small. Especially if you're newer to networking, you don't have to dive into a huge networking group. When you are out networking, listen to people instead of just puking about what your company is all about. Ask questions like, how's your day, or what projects are you working on, or how was your holiday, to get people to open up. Also, we talked about some of the mistakes sometimes we make as entrepreneurs or salespeople is kind of randomly just joining all different networking groups and organizations and boards without really narrowing down to figure out the ones that are most important. You talked about the importance of prioritizing the contacts you make and spending your time on the contacts you make that really matter. And deciding what you really get out of your networking meetings. And then last, we talked about 30-second pitch, creating a pitch that is targeted to a very specific audience and getting rid of the jargon. Question on LinkedIn or social media in general. Is it possible to engage people on social media platforms?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it's possible. And I think some tips I would have for that would be on LinkedIn, in the last maybe year or so, LinkedIn has opened up their publishing platform to everyone instead of just inviting certain people to do it. For me, that has been huge. I try to do articles as often as I have time for. And what's great about those is they show your expertise. People can comment and like them and start following you based on your body of work. And they show up in your profile so that anybody that looks in your profile can kind of see what you're all about by seeing the kind of topics that you write about. So I would really encourage people, especially if you're maybe in transition or you're new, a lot of times young professionals think I don't have experience. How can I show that I have expertise, or how can I get people to notice me online? LinkedIn publishing platform is a great way to start that and start getting some traction on LinkedIn. And the other thing I really like is within Facebook, a lot of people have started doing Facebook communities. So, for example, a friend of mine locally has started one called Getting Organized on the Main Line. And the Main Line is the area that we live in here in Pennsylvania outside of Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. She's a personal organizer, and she started a community group on Facebook. And what's nice about the community group on Facebook is it has a lot less rigidity than just a business Facebook page. So people can engage more. And she posts about different things, but the great thing is that the group has blown up and people, post every day about different situations they're having and questions. How do I organize my kids' toys? What do I do with all this holiday stuff? What are your ideas for this closet? People post articles about organizing tips, especially this time of year, decluttering, getting rid of stuff, donating before the end of the year. So, that's just one example. The group has really grown very, very active and big. And I think depending on your industry, that can really be helpful.
That's awesome. I'm huge on LinkedIn publishing. For many years, I've been a writer for the Huffington Post and Entrepreneur magazine. And I'll tell you, the place that I write most now, I still write for Entrepreneur and Huffington, but 2 or 3 times a week, I publish on LinkedIn because I get so much more traction than any other platform I write for.
That's great that you're able to do it 2 to 3 times a week. That's wonderful. Yeah.
Question about when do you think it's time for somebody let's just say, what are your thoughts in general about organizing your own networking events?
Yeah, so I definitely organize my own networking events. Again, I think, it's doing it the right way and then realizing that some things are going to work and other things aren't and not really taking it personally. So gotcha. I think, first of all, like I said, with, starting out networking, don't set yourself up for failure. So one of the things I see happen a lot is that people don't give themselves enough lead time to plan events and promote the event. So if you're planning your own event, I think you should give yourself at least, maybe 6 weeks to promote it and put it out there and know that you're going to have to engage in a lot of self-promotion and hopefully have other people share your event and get some traction with that. A lot of times I see people plan events for maybe a week or 2 away and then wonder why they didn't get the turnout.
Right.
So having said that, sometimes I leave myself a lot of time and I have a great turnout, and sometimes I do everything right and I don't have a good turnout. And then you have to look at, was it a bad time of year? Was it an inconvenient location? Was it just a fluke? But they can be very helpful, especially if, let's say for somebody like me, I do a lot of speaking now for other organizations and companies. But in the beginning, when there weren't people trying to hire me to speak, it was helpful to form some of my own networking events and have an audience where I could practice some talks and I could start to get some traction for what I was trying to do without worrying about people calling on me, and waiting for that to happen.
Great advice. All right. We have time for one more question, only about a minute left. when I attend a networking event, is it a good idea to ask for business, or should we only ask for business outside of a networking event?
I don't think it's ever a good idea at a networking event to ask for business. But for example, let's say you're a realtor. I think it's fine at a business event if you're having a nice conversation with somebody to say, do you know anybody in your network that you think I should be introduced to who might be looking to buy or sell? And letting people think about who they might be able to set you up with in their network. But I think, sometimes I've been at networking events where somebody says, I sell air conditioners, we should meet next week. Can you meet Wednesday or Thursday? And I think to myself, we can't meet at all because I'm not interested, you're pushy, and I don't need an air conditioner. So you don't want to be that person because you're just going to close off the relationship. But if there's an opportunity to, have people maybe introduce you to somebody that could lead to business, I think that's great. But my personal view is never directly ask for business at a networking event when you first meet somebody.
That's awesome. Again, everybody, we have Jennifer Lynn Robinson. She is CEO and founder of Purposeful Networking, and her goal is to help people become more comfortable and confident with their networking skills. She does workshops, seminars, and speaking engagements for workplaces, business associations, nonprofits, and conferences. You can check out Jennifer on Facebook at facebook.com/eventswithapurpose, or you can find her at Twitter at RUNetworked, and her website is purposefulnetworking.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks, Jennifer. That's going to do it for this edition of Get Real with Bob and Stacey. Make sure to tune in again next weekend for more.